every day to be traumatized.
Welcome to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer. I teach in the Sociology Department at Western Michigan University. With me today are two of our regular viewmeisters or commentators. On my right is Don Cooney. Don is in the School of Social Work at Western Michigan University, and he's also a Kalamazoo City Commissioner. And on my left is Felix Brooks, back in town after a little bit of a excursion, a hiatus down in North Carolina, but we're really glad to have Felix back. And Felix is also working in the Department of Sociology right now, which is great. So when we first got on the set, we said, any news to talk about? For those of you that don't know about our show, we've been around since 2001.
Yep.
So that's a long time. And over those long years, we've taken on a number of really tough issues, critical issues. And we've always tried to deal with the most important issues going on in the world and our political system, and to try to present perspectives that you're not likely to get on the mainstream news, the legacy news. And I think we've done that. Maybe we've taken as our mission over the years what Noam Chomsky said back in the 1960s, that it was the responsibility of intellectuals to speak truth and expose lies. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes for journalists and social critics in general. And so I think we've tried to, as much as we could, doing the research that we do, try to speak the truth as we see it and expose lies that we think are being told to us, to cover up very harmful activities that are going on.
Right.
So with that kind of mission in mind, we now have entered a new era with Trump 2.0. And so the last couple of weeks have just been a torrent of actions. Steve Bannon once said, of course, that the idea was to flood the zone with BS, to discombobulate people, to get people unsettled. And certainly there have been just a rash of actions, mostly executive actions, that have been taken. And so I think what we want to do today is to kind of take a step back and analyze what's been going on the last couple of weeks. And as we prepare to do that, I just want to lay out a little bit of a framework here, kind of an abstract overview of what's been going on. And to me, there are three things that jump out. Number one, that almost everything that Donald Trump and Elon Musk, President Musk and Vice President Trump say is not true. Not true, not supported by any facts or any empirical evidence. Lies maybe is the bolder word to use here. I think we've had a litany of lies. Musk is doing it just as much as Trump is. And so that's the one thing that makes it very difficult right off the bat, because everything that they say, every way they frame their actions are basically not true. They're lies. And that's important for us to talk about and to try to pull those apart, try to expose those lies, as Chomsky said. The second thing that's, I think, really, really important to understand is the harms that are occurring. The actions that are being taken have tremendously negative consequences. There are direct harms occurring all around the world. I mean, because when they close the USAID program, that means children will starve, won't get the food that they need, medicines won't be delivered, and the harms that are occurring in our own country are also monumental. So it's really important. These are not just abstract theoretical things that are going on. These are things that have direct impact to people in their lives on the ground. The third thing that I think is really, really important to emphasize is that almost every one of these actions is illegal, blatantly unconstitutional. And so I think it's important for us to keep making that point, that what Trump and Musk are doing is not only harmful and wrong in a moral sense, it's also illegal. And it's not like they couldn't have tried to do the things they're doing through legal means, right? I mean, the Republican Party controls the Senate, they control the House, they control the Supreme Court. And if Trump had wanted to, he could have asked for legislation, and Congress could have fulfilled its constitutional duty, and we would have had some vigorous discussion and debate about that. But that's not the route that they've taken. It's been a dictatorial kind of high-handed imposition of executive orders that have been issued by the Trump administration. So with those three things as kind of framing our discussion, let's get into the heart of what's been going on. So, Don, who is this guy Elon Musk, and why is he on our TV screens all the time? Why was he in the Oval Office the other day?
Because he contributed how many millions? 200 and what?
250 million?
250 million to the campaign. He bought his way in. And he has been just like a bull in a china shop, just recklessly going around cutting programs that have been authorized by Congress that are serving people and making a real difference in people's lives, and just canceling them, firing people without any authorization. I see that our Attorney General in Michigan today has issued a suit against the government for what he's doing, because what he's doing is what you said, Ron. He has no right in the law to do what he's doing, and a lot of people are being hurt. USAID is the best example, where people are actually dying because they're not getting the medicine that we have been providing. But it's also the harm that he's doing by firing people and getting rid of people that are providing important services to the country. It's important also to know that he's a South African, and President Trump has now spoken out about Afrikaners as a persecuted group in South Africa without any justification. As you said in the beginning, he lied about some of the legislation that is taking place in South Africa. And so what we see is white supremacy issues. We see this idea of cutting resources that affect working people and the poor, and a large shift of resources to the people that already are exceedingly wealthy.
Felix, Musk heads up something called the Department of, what is it?
Governmental Efficiency, DOGE is what they call it.
Dodge, whatever. Anyway, your take on what's happening with...
I'm trying to parse in my mind with my political science background whether he's more Oliver Cromwell or Nicholas Rasputin, because he seems to be a cross between both of those figures, in that he has extrajudicial, extra executive authority without any of the accountability. And he's been given the mandate from the president to go in and do whatever you want to do. In fact, the president said, you know, if he does anything that we don't want him to do, we'll say something. Well, no one said anything. So that means everything that he's doing is okay. You hear that from the House of Representatives, from Speaker Johnson.
Oh, Johnson.
Silence. So what that tells me is that they're perfectly happy with him doing what he's doing, and the whole accountability piece we talked about before. When the Supreme Court gave the president immunity,
right,
they basically put him in a position where he doesn't have to be held accountable to anybody. And so when he has his minions go out and do the things that they're doing, he's not worried about anybody having to pay any political or legal price for that. So now they feel emboldened to do what they want to do. Like when he takes his DOGE guys into the Treasury Department and strong arms the officials there and gets into their system, he's not worried about there being any accountability. And that's a dangerous sign in a democracy, given that the things that they're doing are supposed to be under the purview of the Congress. Cutting grants, cutting funding, that's supposed to be the congressional prerogative. You can't impound these funds at the executive level. But as you said, we talked about this before, Ron, when the vice president said that that the courts can't stop the president from doing anything in his legitimate authority. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically, what you're trying to say is he's omnipotent. He can do whatever he wants to do. And that's just simply not true. There's no constitutional foundation for it to take that sort of view, but doesn't matter because they figure we're not going to be held accountable. We can do what we want to do, and we're going to continue to do it. So we're just going to bulldoze people and create, more importantly, create an atmosphere, particularly among the federal workforce, of fear and anxiety. That's what they want. They want people to quit. They want people to leave so they can fill those positions with their own cronies. You know, basically what we had before the civil service was what they called a spoils system. That meant whoever became president could then appoint whoever he wanted to all the important positions of throughout the federal government. And so by us dealing with these purges that they're engaging in now, that's what they want. They want to replace those people with loyalists. That's what they want.
So they're firing the professional civil servants who are supposed to be nonpartisan and should not change with the change of a political administration, right? I mean, there are some positions, obviously, that the president, the new executive can appoint, but the professional civil servants within the federal government are supposed to carry over and be professional and carry out the responsibilities.
Which is that whole talking out of both sides of your mouth, because on the one hand, we want the best and the brightest.
Oh, yeah.
But these people that they're bringing in aren't the best and the brightest. In most cases, they're not even qualified for the positions or the organizations or the parts of the government that they're leading.
Right, right. No question about it. Yes. Yeah, and they're pretty open about it too. We want to put our people in there. We're going to make sure that our people are going in there. Yeah, and it's so disruptive. Plus, how is that going to? It's supposed to be government efficiency. How's it going to be efficient when they put in unqualified people running these different programs?
Yeah, Musk was tasked by President Trump, apparently, to find waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government and to downsize the role of the federal government in American society, right? And so what Musk has done is decided that the best way to do that is to use a blowtorch and set it all on fire, or take a sledgehammer and smash every agency in the federal government, or to use a wrecking ball to knock. I mean, all those images come to mind, right?
Right, right.
Blowtorch, a wrecking ball, a sledgehammer. It's not subtle. It's not, and it doesn't seem. It's not thoughtful. It's not based on evidence. It just seems to be whatever Elon Musk doesn't like, or more importantly, any part of the government that has hindered Elon Musk in his business practices, right? Yeah. Because many of the agencies that he's destroying have, he's had trouble with, have been investigating him for various problems with his companies. And so there's that element of corruption on top of it, the vested interest of Elon Musk with all his many millions of dollars in contracts with the federal government and things that he's done that he's been investigated for in the past. Now that this is his chance to go in there and just demolish all that aspect of the regulatory apparatus of the government that could hinder him. So that's what he's doing now. Again,
well, before you get off that point, if we're talking about efficiency and saving money, a good place might be to start would be the Pentagon, which has failed their last 7 audits because they can't account for where their money is going. And we know the inefficiency where they'll buy a screw that costs 3 cents and pay 81 cents for it, a pipe that costs $1 and they're paying $35 for it. So that might be, because that's where the money is, but we're not going there and we're not looking at that. So it's a sham.
There's $800 billion in the Pentagon budget, and the Pentagon has never passed an audit, never, ever, in its history has it passed an audit. And of course there's enormous waste and fraud and abuse in the Pentagon budget. And yes, we haven't seen any raids on the Pentagon. We haven't
No.
seen the sledgehammer being applied to the Pentagon. And that's the thing. Okay, perhaps if you go, say, to the Department of Education, there might be an issue here or an issue there that needs to be addressed, right? And so if you would go in a thoughtful way and do an examination, you might find some things that need to be corrected, right? But that's not the approach that they're taking. They're just saying, we are by fiat saying that this entire department is filled with waste, fraud, and abuse. They never provide any evidence.
No evidence.
So, I mean, it's amazing to me that there hasn't been one shred of evidence presented by Elon Musk or Donald Trump about waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, they've pointed out a couple of things, and they were wildly wrong on what these things were. What they said about them, again, were just completely false. Just for example, one example, they said, well, we're sending, millions of dollars worth of condoms to Hamas.
100 million.
To Hamas. Well, it turned out, no, that was completely wrong, that there were some condoms being sent to a place called Gaza in Mozambique for reproductive health care and for preventing AIDS. But they took that, I mean, again, their lack of knowledge of the world and government led them to say that this was going to Hamas, and it was, again, that was their example, but they were wildly, wildly wrong. And they have not come up with any verifiable fraud at this point. They're not even being asked to by the media. I mean, I think the media's role has been horrible in this. The White House press corps, the mainstream media, they should be saying, okay, where's the evidence?
Yeah.
Show us where the fraud is. You've just taken a wrecking ball and destroyed this agency without demonstrating that there's any fraud, waste, or abuse in there. And rather than isolating the waste, fraud, or abuse and then getting rid of that, you've destroyed everything else that the agency does. And most of these agencies, of course, are doing things that are important and necessary for the American people.
And they had the opportunity to do that when Musk was standing right next to Trump and the reporters were there, and they didn't ask him any tough questions. It was disgraceful.
Because they're afraid to lose. If they ask any tough questions, they'll lose access.
Lose access. Yeah. Again, fear.
Like, was it the AP that's been kicked out now because they won't refer to the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of the United States, so they're no longer
Gulf of America.
Gulf of America. So they're no longer welcome in the press room.
Right. Yeah, they were banned.
They
from
were
coming
banned.
in.
Wow.
Now, I also want to back up here and point out, and this is extremely important. The Constitution of the United States is being violated. The actions that they're taking are blatantly unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Why are they unconstitutional? Because Article 1, the very first article of the Constitution, is on the Congress. And it grants Congress the right of the purse strings, right?
Yeah.
To the grant for the appropriations.
Yes.
And so that's Congress's role and responsibility.
And to follow it up, and the Supreme Court codified that in law in the 1970s after the stuff that was happening with Richard Nixon, and they said, yes, in fact, Congress does have power over the purse strings, and the president just can't simply impound funds, at his will. He can't do that.
No, 1974 ruling said that if Congress has appropriated money, the president cannot refuse to spend that money.
Congress has passed it, it's been signed into law, and now that can't be pulled back, impounded. And again, we have that test case from the Nixon administration from the 70s where the Supreme Court ruled, as you guys have said. So it's extremely clear that the Constitution is being violated here. Congress's role is being ignored, and they're doing things that they have no legal basis to do. Right? It's not within the purview of the President of the United States to go in and to smash agencies that have been established by Congress, whose funding has been approved by Congress, and they're carrying out their lawful functions under the Constitution.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is just blatantly unconstitutional. There was an excellent article in the Washington Post this week by a law professor who pointed out how the Doge or whatever it is, the Musk, again, Musk has never been confirmed by the by the Senate. This agency isn't a real agency. It's a figment of Musk's imagination and Donald Trump's imagination. It's never been formally created, authorized by Congress, and Musk has never been confirmed. So we have this unelected billionaire who is now running roughshod over and demolishing the federal government without any constitutional or legal authority to do so.
And being cheered on by the folks that should be in a position to do something to stop this sort of thing. In fact, they're cheering him on or being silent, both on the Senate side and on the and in the House.
Yeah, encouraged.
Yeah, they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But like we talked about before, until those cuts hit home, and so this week you heard Senator Katie Britt saying, "Oh, wait a minute, hold the phone here. A lot of research money goes to the University of Alabama. Might we want to be more surgical about these cuts?" Like, no, that's not what this is about. And the question is, well, how far will she take that? And my guess is not very far. She'll, whine a little bit about it, but this is what's going to happen unless the courts step in and say, no, you can't do this anymore.
Right. But here's the thing I think is many of them have to stand for election in less than 2 years.
Yep.
And when this starts hitting their districts, what are they going to choose? They're in a tough place because if they speak out, then he's going to get them primary. But if they don't speak out, the people in the community are going to say, "You're letting this happen. You're not taking a stand against." So I think they're starting to look at that.
They're going to be in a tough spot because if you start hemorrhaging jobs from your district because this cut here and this cut here happened. And I think University of Alabama, is the largest employer in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
Their system is. And if you take $600 million in grant money away, that's a lot of jobs.
Yeah. And USAID, the farmers provide billions of dollars of food that is now it's completely stopped. They're going to start speaking out too. Yeah.
It's not what they signed up for.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's I think it was a senator from Kansas who was complaining that farmers from Kansas were being damaged by this wholesale approach. Food was left rotting on docks, and again, their ability to have that as a source of their
income, guaranteed income.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Republican Congress, I heard David Jolly, who was a former Republican congressman from Florida. I heard him being interviewed on television the other day, and he said, I've been saying this for weeks now. The Republican Congress has collapsed. Congress has collapsed.
Wow.
It's just they've completely caved in. They're nothing but sycophants.
I keep thinking of this cartoon image in my mind where you have this building and you have guards on both ends with machine guns, and a little kid walks up to him and says, well, what's in there? And he says, well, that room is full of spines that used to belong to Republicans. And we're guarding it to make sure they don't ever get out, Because that's the image that comes to mind. They won't do anything. They can see what's going on, and they're so terrified that they're not going to say anything. No. Just go along and get along,
Yeah. And the harm that's being done is maybe ongoing. It's not just a little thing here and this is hurting us right now. No, I think the damage that they're doing. USAID, it's not just even about having those resources, which are enormously important. They've lost credibility there. And it's hard to build that credibility with those people. And I saw the former Republican head of USAID on television speaking and just excoriating them for what they're doing. And so it's interesting. More and more traditional Republicans are speaking out.
Because you can do, even if the courts say that this is wrong, the damage has already been done.
Right.
They can slow things to a crawl just by appointing people at the head of those organizations and tell them, you're the figurehead, but don't do anything. We don't want you to do anything.
Yeah.
Like the justice, stop all your investigations.
Right.
So technically you haven't shut the division down, but these are the areas that are no-go zones for them now. They can't go here.
Right. Right.
The Republican Congress, the Senate in particular, I thought it was very instructive in terms of their their approach here when the most controversial candidates for cabinet positions came up. And there were a lot. Because
Yes.
most of the people, let's be honest, most of the people Trump has nominated are unqualified
Yes.
for the job. And they're incompetent. And they bring incredible baggage with them. I'm thinking Robert Kennedy. I'm
Right.
thinking
Hegseth.
Hegseth, Gabbard. I mean, we could go on and on. Kash Patel.
Kash Patel.
Patel.
Yeah, I heard a commentator refer to them the other day as the worst and the dimmest, which was a play on the best and the brightest.
Yeah, right.
So these people, I mean, there were many Republican senators who were horrified by some of these nominations. And they were thinking about resisting and not going along. And of course, well, who was Gates? They first nominated Matt Gates to be Attorney General, which is like the most ludicrous nomination ever. That one did crash and burn right off the bat. So I thought, well, if that happened, maybe they'll step
Kennedy,
up and
for
say
sure,
something.
yeah.
And Kennedy for sure will never get approved. And then you had, you know, people like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who were talking about these.
Yeah.
Some of these nominees are not qualified; they're not competent to run these positions, and you say, oh, they're going to vote against most of these people. And then Mitch McConnell, of all people, was the only, in the end, was the only one who would vote against them. But you thought, well, maybe there's got to be at least 4 or 5 Republican senators who say this is crazy.
Right.
These people should not be running these agencies. You know, Hegseth should not be the Secretary of Defense,
Oh,
right?
Lord.
Robert Kennedy should be nowhere near government health agency, right? Patel should never, ever be the director of the FBI. These are disastrous appointments. And yet, in the end, they all capitulated. They all
did.
buckled, except for McConnell.
McConnell. Surprise.
But see, McConnell's retired.
Yeah, right.
He's
He's out.
retiring.
He's
So
not,
he doesn't
don't
have to
even-
worry about, you know, a primary challenge or
Right.
his phone ringing off the hook like some of these other senators from Elon Musk, people saying, you know what, if you don't vote the way we want you to vote, we're going to challenge you in the primary.
Yeah.
That's what happened with Joni Ernst. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, they did. So tremendous pressure was placed on them, and they all buckled. They
Yeah.
all capitulated. And they also seemed to fear that if they opposed Trump, that they might themselves be subjected to personal violence or their family.
That's true.
That the MAGA, and of course all the January 6th people had been pardoned by Trump or had now back out on the street, including some very violent people.
Yes.
And again, I think the threat of violence against these people and their families was also part of their calculation.
And that's the story that's the story behind the story. When you talk about the partners of those folks, basically that's a permission slip. Go back to doing what you were doing. If we need you, we'll call you up. So it's that implicit threat to anybody who opposes them, because those folks are not going to be investigated by the Justice Department anymore. Nobody's looking at what they're doing. In fact, I heard an interview the other day with Stuart Rhodes' wife, and she says he's back out organizing, his group since he's gotten out of prison. That's what he's gone back to doing that. This is his ex-wife, I should say. She says he's back to because they know nobody's going to be watching them anymore. No one at the Justice Department is going to investigate anybody that the president has pardoned because they're for fear of their losing their own job. So,
Stand back and stand by.
So they got a green light.
Yeah. Right.
So the Republicans in Congress, which you would hope that there were some people of integrity in those positions that would stand up and say, no, this is, at a minimum, they could have defended their own institution. Right?
That's right.
They should have said, wait a minute, we agree with you that the size of the federal government needs to be reduced. But that's our job to do, right? We should be participating in doing this. This is our responsibility. We created these agencies. Yep. We've funded these agencies. We passed these appropriations. This is the job of Congress, according to the Constitution, and not the job of an unelected billionaire like Elon Musk. But they don't even seem to be in a position where they're going to defend their own institution, their own role in the constitutional process.
Yeah, and they're saying, and they should be saying too, hey, this is important work. Look what is happening here. Look at the good things that we're able to do through the education department. Look at the help we're giving to inner city schools. Look at the kids that we've been able to send to college because of these programs. But they just abdicate their responsibility totally. Yeah.
All right. Well, it seems to me that the story of Musk taking the sledgehammer to the federal government, trying to reduce the number of employees at the federal government, and again, it's just being done in such a heavy-handed way with no discernment about, okay, what government positions are valuable, which could be cut, right? And to look at an agency that's funding cancer research and to say, well, boom, that's gone. Because there was some fraud over in this part, the whole agency has to go, and that means all the good stuff that the agency does also has to go. Well, our own colleague, Regina Nelson, who should be here with us today, one of her grants from the Department of Education was cut, and so she's been scrambling this week to try to deal with it. Maybe the next time we meet, she can give us more of an insight into what it's like to be on the receiving end of one of these blows.
There's no doubt that there's some waste in the federal government.
Yeah.
Nobody would disagree with that. But they don't look for the waste. They just look for ways that we can get rid of things. And
rid of people.
And rid of people, especially rid of people.
Especially if they think those people aren't people that will be loyal to them.
That's it. That's the test. That's the test. Yeah.
And again, having Musk in charge of this whole process with his enormous conflicts of interest. I mean, I think we really, really need to keep coming back to the conflicts of interest that Elon Musk has. How is it possible that a man who has so many government contracts, so many millions of dollars at stake, is allowed to be the one to make the most critical decisions? That just seems unfathomable to me.
Yes.
That this is the approach that they've taken.
And of course, he won't find any inefficiencies in any of his contracts. They'll all be in other contracts. They're doing a perfect job.
Well, I think he has 7 that I know of, the contracts with the federal government worth billions of dollars, especially his SpaceX thing and all in there. But no. Plus, interfering with international stuff, where he definitely has his businesses around the world and making sure that they know the pressure that he can put on them. It's just wrong to have him in that position.
And his support for far-right causes, not just in the United States, but in Germany and other countries in Europe,
Yeah.
Where he's come out and blatantly supported those folks.
Right, he goes there in Germany and supports the right-wing candidates, right. Unacceptable.
So, we've had a lot of protests all over the country over what's happening with Musk and his sledgehammer approach to demolishing the federal government. And that's good, and we need to see more of that. Right? If people are upset, if people are concerned about this, they need to organize, they need to protest, they need to get out on the streets. And we've seen a lot of that happening already. The other thing that has to happen and has been happening is that the courts have to step in. I mean, it's a slow and inefficient process, however. Musk has already moved ahead and swung his sledgehammer and broken these agencies, and so sometimes it's going to be hard to put them back together. Yep. But now federal judges are at least stepping in and saying, no, you don't have the legal authority to do this.
Right.
You have to stop swinging your sledgehammer. You have to back off, and at least until we have some kind of hearing about this whole process. So that's been happening, and we've seen more and more situations where courts have stepped in and said, no, you can't do this, and instances where, well, we had that situation where they announced, a federal spending halt a week or so ago. Everything was just shut down, halted, and there was enormous pushback and resistance from all around the country, and they backed off on that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So there has to be more of that happening. So those are two ways in which it can happen. But of course, the concern, Felix, you talked about it earlier, if the courts rule against the Trump administration, will they abide by the courts?
And we talked about this before. Andrew Jackson, his famous statement back in the 1820s was, the Supreme Court has made its ruling. Now let them go out and enforce it, because they know that they don't have any ability to enforce the ruling. We've been able to get along as a polity because presidents and other elected officials have respected the rulings from the courts. If that stops happening,
we have nothing.
Then we don't have a rule of law anymore.
It all falls apart.
Because if you listen to the vice president, he acts as if the executive branch is the authoritative branch, as opposed to what the Constitution says, where we have three co-equal branches in the government.
Right.
None is supreme over the other.
With identified responsibilities. Yes. So that's going to be the test when it goes to the Supreme Court, because he's working them up to go to the Supreme Court. And we know how the Supreme Court has ruled in the past. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when those cases get to the Supreme Court. And what John Roberts is going to do.
Because like the whole birthright citizenship, that's black letter law in the Constitution.
Yes, clear.
What being born here makes you a citizen. And I mean, and that was, back, the days of the 14th Amendment, that was put in there for a specific reason.
Yeah.
And for him to say, well, I'm just going to sign this executive order and that we're going to end that, he knows that's illegal. But like you said, Don, he wants it to go all the way up to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, right. Because he thinks he's got allies there who will rule. So that's going to be a test for them, too.
Yeah, it will be a test for them.
Do they have any integrity at all? I mean, they're going to have to live with that, right? Yeah. But, it's got to work its way. But I heard Jeffrey Rosen the other day, and he was saying, the Supreme Court, but really, it's the people. When you read the Constitution, we the people, because the ultimate authority are the people. Yep. And that's why demonstrations, that's why people calling people out, that's why people being involved is the ultimate test. That's what's got to happen. The people got to say, this is unacceptable, we're not going to take this. That's what's got to happen.
Because the administration wants to encourage fear and apathy.
Exactly.
So that you don't feel like doing anything. So you're so tired, you're so worn down that we'll just wait till this is all over. What happens if? But that's not what they're counting on. They're counting on this going on for a while.
Right.
They want to knock people off balance and keep them off balance.
And you see it carried through the Republican Party. In the state House this week passed a resolution or a policy saying that cities will not be getting any extra aid unless they acknowledge their cooperation with the plans to send the undocumented people out. So this is in Lansing here. Yeah. So they're trying to put pressure on the cities to say, okay, well, they want to tell Washington, we're on your side. And they want to tell us in the cities, hey, if you don't fall in line, then we're going to cut resources to you.
And I know we have a divided House in Michigan right now. Don't we have a divided Senate and House of Representatives?
The House has gone back to the Republican control.
But the Senate still remains in control of the Democrats, and they still have a Democratic governor. So
right.
So we have some saving grace there.
We do there, and yes. So we haven't talked about the deportations yet.
Yeah, let's. I mean, the first thing is so disconcerting because my last thoughts on what Musk is doing and what Trump is doing here is that this is a political coup.
Yes.
This is actually
an attempted political coup.
An attempted political coup, and it will fundamentally alter the constitutional order. If they succeed in carrying this out, they're not stopped by the courts or they don't abide by the rulings of the courts, then we've lost our democracy.
We might as well be we'll be a monarchy.
Yes.
It's that stark.
Yes.
It's that stark.
It's that stark.
It's that stark. We will have lost our democracy. We've lost the constitutional order, and a coup will have been effected. And I don't think the average Republican voter signed up for that when they voted for Trump. you know, certainly there were some of the hardcore right that did,
Yeah.
but I don't think the average voter that voted for Donald Trump was thinking that he was going to, you know, go in and just take a blowtorch to the entire federal government and
No.
destroy everything
No.
and put himself in as a dictator, even though there were plenty of people that kept trying to say and provide warnings,
Yeah.
you know, this was likely to happen. That's why we should not vote for this guy.
I mean,
So-
you know, he's following the same blueprint as the president of Turkey and the president of Hungary. You know, Viktor Orban especially. I mean, that's the model that he's using
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I can control all the levels, the levers of power, if I can control the media and the civil service, I have my coup.
Yep.
You know, if I got it under my thumb, I have my coup. I can do whatever I want to do. You know.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. If there's no resistance below, that's got to be the strategy for change, is to break off that resistance, break off what they call the pillars of power,
Yeah.
the people that support what's going on. If we can draw them off, then we got a chance. But without that, no, he's
You
got
know,
it.
and in our society where disinformation seems to run rampant, you know,
Yeah.
that's what makes it even more difficult.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that they want to do is they want to discredit the media that they don't like.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right. That's right.
They want everybody to be part of the, you know, the Fox News, you know, sphere or the One Network America sphere, because that's where their storyline, that's where their narrative resonates. And if they can take all the other players off the stage or delegitimize them, which they've tried to do, then they'll tell, well, listen to what we tell you. Our truth is what the truth is, you know.
Right. It's the propaganda thing that this is all we hear,
Yeah.
the big lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the playbook has always been for any kind of fascist takeover or authoritarian rule is to scapegoat certain groups in the society, right?
Yeah.
And to point to them as the problem and rally everybody to go after
Trans
those groups.
people.
And that's what we've got with the deportation, with the trans issue, with just diversity,
Right, right.
equity,
Yeah, right.
issues
Mhm.
right
That's
from
the
the beginning,
problem.
right?
Yeah.
And so there's so much of that going on. I mean, the executive rulings that Trump has made to root out anything that, you know, anything to do with DEI, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Disgraceful.
even to the point where Linda McMahon, who's been involved in the wrestling world, is now being nominated as Secretary of Education. You can't make this stuff up, right? She was asked, would it be illegal to teach Black history? Did you hear this?
No, I did not hear this.
She wouldn't commit.
No, she said, I'll have to,
check on that.
check
I'll
on
have to
that. I'll
look
get
into
back to you.
What? That it might be illegal to teach Black history? I mean, and again, it's just been across the board the heavy-handed way in which this has been, and again, it makes people run scared. So, yeah, it's just been incredible.
Because they want to erase certain parts of society.
Yes.
And they want
Yes.
to do so in such a way that when the next generation comes along, they won't even remember those things even existed. I mean, that's textbook 1984. I mean, if you talk about the Ministry of Information in George Orwell's 1984, that's what their job was, to take certain words, certain phrases, certain narratives out of the lexicon, not only in real time, but to go back and erase it from all the books that existed before that. So when people read the stuff, those words don't even exist.
Wow.
They can't even utter those words because that language no longer exists. And this is what they want to do.
They want to erase history.
They want to erase history.
So I think Daniel and Larry back in the control room can pull up cover of a book written by Yale historian Jason Stanley, and there it is, Erasing History, How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. I mean, he lays it out so clearly in that book. He also wrote a book, an earlier book, about how fascism itself works. And so again, if anybody's interested in the whole concept of fascism, which is something I don't think most people would have ever thought would be mentioned in American political circles, how fascism works, or how fascists, again, or authoritarians try to gain control by erasing the past, erasing history, and controlling the narrative, just as you were articulating. 1984 was the fictional account of how that can happen, right?
Yeah.
And so again, that might be something people would be interested in taking a look at and reading.
The other good reference before we move on would be, for people interested, would be to listen to either one of Rachel Maddow's podcasts that she's done in the last 2 years, because they revisit that history from the 40s and 50s, the whole America First movement. So
Yeah.
I mean, and fascism plays a large role in that, because we talk about America First in today's context, but that's not anything new. There was America First movement from the mid 1930s all the way up through the early 1960s, up until to Barry Goldwater. So that faction has always existed, and it receded, and now it's all of a sudden blossomed again. So
Right. McCarthy hearings were a part of that, and
the whole Lavender Scare, which is when they purged the State Department of people they suspected of being homosexual.
Yep.
That all took place in the 1950s.
Yep. Right. Yeah, that's true. Right.
So those purges that we're seeing now, it's happened here before. We just thought that we were past that, here in 2025, but we've visited this place before. I mean, Joseph McCarthy was the exemplar of that in this country.
Right.
And he was allowed, like we see now with Musk, McCarthy was allowed to get away with this for years, destroying people's lives for years. And the Congress didn't bat an eye. And so we're seeing sort of history rhyme with Elon Musk now. He's, like I say, he could be a modern day version of Joseph McCarthy in terms of the tactics and strategies that he's using to discredit and destroy people.
Good parallel. Yeah, I agree. Wow.
This week we also were presented with another story about how these things can be connected within the new administration, Trump 2.0. You mentioned the issue of trying to carry out the mass deportation, and apparently that's going kind of slow, at least in Trump's mind. It's not happening fast enough. He's not getting the cooperation that he wants, and in particular in New York City. And so the mayor of New York City, who was under indictment from federal prosecutors who were, he's a Democrat. He was indicted by under the Biden administration Justice Department. It wasn't the Trump administration. But he made a little trip down to Mar-a-Lago, and then when he came back, all of a sudden things started to happen. And now apparently all the charges against him are going to be dropped, and in exchange, although they claim this is not a quid pro quo, but
just coincidence.
He's going to allow certain things to happen, even if he doesn't have the legal authority to do so in New York, to allow for the effort to carry out mass deportations. But this whole plan encountered a snag, because the young woman who had been appointed as the federal prosecutor in New York wouldn't go along with it. She wouldn't drop the charges and said, in fact, we're ready to present new charges, more charges. And she was pressed by the Trump DOJ to do what they had agreed to. Actually, they had a meeting, and one of the DOJ people, who is one of Donald Trump's defense attorneys now in the DOJ, saw that some of her staff were taking notes, and he said, no, you can't take notes. I'll gather up all those notes before we leave today. And then they claim, oh no, we didn't cut a deal with the mayor, but it's very clear that they did. And so she resigned. And so they said, okay, fine, we'll just get people at DOJ to do it. Well, they went to their Office of Integrity at the DOJ, and one after another, 5 more people resigned.
So encouraging, so encouraging.
We're old enough to remember the Saturday Night Massacre.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And back in Watergate days, and this was sort of another version of that, where people were being demanded to do something, and their integrity would not allow. And again, these were these were Trump people. For the most part, the young woman in New York was, she's a member of the Federalist Society. She's a staunch conservative. She was appointed by Trump just recently, but she said, no, I can't do this. This is not right.
This is a bridge too far.
This is a bridge too far.
Which was wonderful.
This is corrupt. You can't make a corrupt deal like this and wave away somebody's prosecution in exchange for them to do favors for you.
Unless you don't have any fear of being held accountable for what you've done, which is, again, that's the chess match that the Supreme Court set up when they gave the man immunity. If you do that to a bad actor, you open yourself up for all kinds of problems. And here's where, like you said, Ron, here's where it shows up. Because what are you going to do to me? Even if it is a corrupt deal, what are you going to do? Because he'll find somebody to drop those charges.
They'll eventually find, I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Eventually it's going to happen. But, again, there's some resistance.
Yeah.
Here are some people showing some courage, some integrity, right? Why don't some of the Republican senators show that same level of courage and integrity to resist what they should know are obviously unconstitutional actions being taken by this administration?
Yeah.
And yet they lack the courage to do that, or maybe they lack the integrity to do that.
Yeah.
But this is a shining example, and obviously, if this coup that's ongoing is to ultimately be resisted, people of goodwill and integrity are going to have to stand up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Republicans are going to have to stand up to resist this. If they truly believe in the Constitution and they believe in the rule of law, if they believe in the proper role of Congress, if they believe that there is some proper role for government to play, that it shouldn't all be sledgehammered out of existence, then they're going to have to put their foot down and stand up and to take a stand. So far, they don't seem willing to do that. And if they don't, then I don't think the courts can do what they can, but I think unless there's resistance from Republicans in the Congress, I don't think this can be stopped.
Yeah, I think the 2026 election is going to be really important because if they don't resist and they get reelected, then there's a big trouble.
All bets are off.
Yeah. But if they're stopped, then
they lose one of the houses of Congress, because they don't have a 3-seat majority in the House right now.
Yeah.
That could easily be flipped.
Exactly.
You know?
And usually the party that's in power loses people in the midterm election. So we've got a really good chance here. But
you know, Don, I think that's part of the reason why I think the president is trying to bypass Congress with these executive orders, because he knows and start this trend now, because he knows there's a very good chance in 2 years he won't have the House anyway.
Yeah, I think
so
you're right.
I'm not going to worry about those guys. I'm just going to do what I want to do right now.
Fast, get it done fast, because we got to move on it.
You know, move fast and break things. That's what they're doing.
We've got about 5 minutes left, and not enough time to really get into this in any depth, but I do think it's important to look at some of the foreign affairs, and this requires a longer program. But 2 places in particular, Gaza and Ukraine. So what's the plan for Gaza, Don?
Well,
the Riviera of the Mediterranean, right?
Yeah, we're not going to buy it. We're just going to take it.
We're going to take it.
Because
we have the right
want
to take it.
Right, we'll just take it. Interesting to me, yesterday in the New York Times, there was a full-page ad that the headline was, Trump says all the Palestinians must leave Gaza. We say no to ethnic cleansing. And it was signed by over 50 rabbis, maybe 60. So I think the resistance to that is going to be huge, and internationally the resistance, because you talk about violations of law, violations of all international law, and it's clearly ethnic cleansing. And I believe that people will really fight back on that. That whole idea that you can take 2 million people and push them out to go where?
To Egypt and Jordan. Which is ironic, Don, because we don't want to take any immigrants into the United States. but we're going to tell 2 other countries that you just got to take 2 million people in.
Who have already taken in
Yeah.
huge numbers of refugees. And what's the population of Palestinians in Jordan already? It's more than 50%.
Yeah.
I think it's closer to 70%.
It's pretty high.
Yes, and those countries already, that's the last thing they want is more people being driven into their countries. It makes no sense at all. But it's not surprising. I mean, his son-in-law was there last year scouting out territory for where would be the good places for hotels. So, I mean, I think this is a critical issue to stand up on. You know, I worry that this truce is not going to hold and they're going to re-bomb. And those poor people have been it's crucified. And this should not happen. We got to stand up against that. We
If you
just
look
have
at the model, it smacks eerily of our own Indian removal
Exactly.
back in the 1820s.
1830 Indian Removal Act. We're going to move you west of the Mississippi, and you're going to love it. It's going to be great.
You know, just put you on these little reservations that only have an eighth of the land that you owned before, but you'll be happy about that. And then we'll
Right.
replace you with all these pioneers and settlers that'll come out and just take the land.
Right.
That's
right.
that seems to be what the attitude
Exactly.
is. You know.
Exactly. They don't count. They don't count. Yeah. They would have no say in this whole thing, right? Yeah. It's just painful. Yeah.
So that's one. In terms of foreign policy, I think the Trump people are going to really, really have a difficult time.
Step too far.
Step too far on Gaza. We only have a couple of minutes left, so we can't really get into the situation with Ukraine, other than to say the position of the United States seems to be that Ukraine shouldn't have entered into this war. Which,
right.
That's what Trump actually said the other day. Of course, they didn't. They were invaded by Russia. And that with regard to negotiations, they have to accept that Russia's going to keep the land that they've already acquired, and that Ukraine can never enter into NATO. Okay, now go negotiate. Now we'll have some negotiations after we've already settled the biggest issues. Now Ukraine, you go in there and try to negotiate something. So that's what's happening.
And at first, he didn't mention Ukraine as being involved in the negotiations.
It's just going to be United States and Russia. They're going to meet in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
You know?
It's just like the Palestinians. Us and other people will settle it. The Palestinians out here.
Okay. Well, we're out of time for today. So, yeah, this is, I mean, talk about critical issues. I mean, we've talked about a lot of critical issues over the years, but I think we've never had the kind of critical issues, the kind of threats that are happening now. Threats to American democracy are so real, and we need to talk about this. We need to support the truth, and we need to expose lies. And so hopefully we've done a little bit of that today. Thank you for joining us on Critical Issues, Alternative Views. We hope you come back again. Thanks.